Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the October 1st, 2009 West Sacramento Planning Commission meeting, and I'd like to ask if Commissioner Blackburn would lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A couple housekeeping items. Just make sure anybody in the audience or at the dais that has a cell phone or anything electronic, that they're silenced for this meeting. And also, I'd like to ask anybody that would wish to address the commission to fill out a little form that you can get on the side at the entrance there, so we'll know who wants to speak about which items. So unless you're an applicant, if you're an applicant, then we would naturally ask you to speak. We also have an opportunity at this point for presentations by the public on matters that aren't on the agenda. So if anybody is in the audience that would like to address the commission about something that's not on the agenda but within our subject matter authority, now would be the time to do it. Okay, moving on then, we'll consider the approval of the minutes from the September 17th Planning Commission meeting. Everybody had a chance to read those?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we approve the minutes of September the 17th.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
I'd like to abstain. I was not at that meeting.
I also need to abstain.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have two folks abstaining. Next item would be the approval of the agenda order.
Is there a continuance on item number 4 to
Right.
the 5th of November? Is that correct?
Yes, there is.
Right. Okay, so we would like to follow staff's lead and continue item 4 to the November 5th meeting.
It was never on the agenda anyway.
Well, it was.
Do you want a motion?
Yeah, I think so.
Mind making a motion, but it's not even on the agenda.
Well, it's actually item 4 on our regular agenda is to continue that public hearing. So we could do that now and be done with it.
I'll make a motion that we continue item number 4
To November
to
5th?
November
I'll
5th.
second that.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Seeing none, that carries. Okay, anything else regarding the agenda order? Okay, we'll move on to correspondence and staff communication from the city planner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. First of all, regarding correspondence tonight, you have 2 pieces of material, both dealing with work on the general plan update. We're coming to a relatively significant part in the process. And what you have before you tonight is the Alternatives newsletter, which lays out 3 alternatives for development of the city over the next 20 years, as well as a draft public background report. And in an informal discussion, we'll be talking more about the meeting on October 15th and how that will be carried out, and try to get your input on that. In terms of what occurred and is occurring at the City Council, about a week and 2 weeks ago, we conducted a public hearing on the zoning ordinance amendments as well as the sign ordinance amendments. In the case of the sign ordinance, it was a continuation of a public hearing that was conducted 2 weeks before. Both of those items are scheduled to be adopted by the City Council, their first meeting in October, which I believe is October 7th. There were some changes that the council made, and should the council adopt them, I'll be preparing a short report for you and deliver it as part of the package on October 15th. With regard to the green building ordinance, why that item is not on tonight's agenda is that that was the decision made by staff based on recent events that have been occurring at the national level, primarily with the International Code Council. The International Code Council has indicated in a series of press releases their desire to utilize the California Green Building Code that was adopted in August of this year, and there are actually some changes going on with that code at this moment. So given those actions at the federal level, our staff felt it would be wise to pull back a little bit. We met with the executive director of the California Building Standards Commission yesterday, which was accompanied by members of our Chamber of Commerce. And so right now we're looking at some options. We tentatively indicated that item would be back on your agenda in November. It may not be, but once again, we're seriously looking at the issue of should we look at the option of the state code as opposed to Build It Green and LEED. So that discussion is continuing. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my brief presentation.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We have two items, and actually the same applicant for items 1 and 2, Clearwire. Oh, I keep forgetting that. Thank you. The disclosure of ex parte communications. Has anyone had any communications with any of the applicants tonight?
Mr. Chairman, I had conversation with Mark Capitello regarding item number 3.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I spoke with the applicant on item number 3.
Anybody else? I also spoke actually to Mark Capitello this afternoon regarding that same item. Okay, now we'll move along to the consent agenda. And again, items 1 and 2, Clear Wireless is the applicant, 2 locations, one at 706 Tower Court, the other at 1155 Linden Road. Are there any comments?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion then that we affirm the zoning administrator actions.
I'll second that.
Okay, a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none. Okay, those 2 consent agenda items are approved. Okay, the regular agenda, item number 3 is a workshop on the revised Rayleigh Field noise monitoring program and operating hours. And David Tilley, you're going to make this presentation, I see.
Yes, Chairman Morazzini, good evening. Tonight we're here on a workshop regarding revisions to the Rayleigh Field noise monitoring program. As some members of the Commission are likely to recall, when the Rayleigh Field project was first approved back in 1999, one of the mitigation measures on the project's environmental document was to prepare a concert noise monitoring program. Subsequent to that approval, that noise program was approved and it has been before the Commission a few times in the past, most recently in 2003. The noise monitoring program generally sets up parameters for how they monitor events during concert events, sound levels, where they should do noise monitoring in the field, so having a complaint hotline available, submitting reports afterwards to the city and related matters. Commission last revised that in 2003, and Rayleigh Field has been operating under that program ever since. More recently, Rayleigh Field has approached us to potentially make some revisions to that noise monitoring program, and hence that's why we're here this evening. There's some key aspects of the revised noise monitoring program that I'd like to highlight for you. One is that the desire from Rayleigh Field is to include the Rayleigh Field Amphitheater in this noise monitoring program so that they would have one noise monitoring program for both facilities, the stadium and the amphitheater. And then the second objective is to normalize the hours of operation between the amphitheater and the stadium. When the amphitheater was approved last summer by the Commission, the maximum time an event could go to was 11 o'clock p.m. and that was 7 days a week. That was part of the approval. However, currently at the stadium, based on the 2003 noise monitoring program, events Monday through Thursday must end by 10 o'clock, and Friday through Sunday events must end at 10:30. So one of the objectives of this revised program is to take things to 11 o'clock, 7 days per week in the stadium, as they have already been approved in the amphitheater. Otherwise, the noise monitoring program follows a very similar protocol and format to what the commission has approved previously. We would recommend a few changes to this noise monitoring program if the amphitheater is going to be included. And that would principally be doing some more monitoring in and around the Ironworks project. It was something that was specifically identified in the amphitheater negative declaration. And also we'll need to work on being able to monitor at height with the anticipation of having high-rise buildings being built around the stadium and the amphitheater in the future. We want to try to simulate and make sure we're monitoring noise levels, what would be expected at upper-level buildings that we expect to occur in the future. Those were both key items that were part of the mitigation on the amphitheater. And for the amphitheater to be included in this monitoring program, rather than having its own separate monitoring program, those are two details that we would request be made part of this. Much like the noise monitoring program has been for all these years, it does rely on the Raley Field to largely police itself. They will need to conduct the noise monitoring, submit the reports, and they will have to police the events that make sure that they end at the appropriate time, that sound levels at the mixing board are kept within the parameters and overall. Although the city does have some degree of oversight in that and personnel on site, the noise monitoring program is largely dependent on Raley Field being able to follow it and monitor themselves and self-police. So Jeff Savage with Raley Field is here tonight and is going to present to your commission this evening. So before we get to that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have of me at this time.
Questions, comments? All right, thank you, David. This is a workshop, so we won't have a public hearing, but we certainly can invite the public to make comments. So, Mr. Savage, if you'd like to make some comments regarding this proposal, we'd certainly appreciate hearing from you.
Thank you, staff and commissioners. My name is Jeff Savage. I recognize there's a couple new faces here. David did a great job summarizing. The one point I want to emphasize is the importance of having the two venues consistent with each other, and more specifically with regard to hours of operation. Kind of the goal here ultimately is to be able to have this facility be as successful as possible. And one of those things, consistency, will make it easier for performers, agents, artists. It reduces confusion. Talent also, they're sort of quirky, I'm beginning to find out. Talent also prefers to go on later when it's a little bit darker, when the crowd has arrived. And while we sometimes laugh about the quirkiness and the bowls of green M&Ms that they may request, ultimately it is the talent that we need to please. Otherwise, they're not going to come back, and they're going to tell their friends and their agents that maybe Raley Field and West Sacramento isn't the place for us. So unfortunately, we try to bend over backwards to accommodate them and to make things as easy as possible on them. Consistency between the two facilities also, from a business standpoint, from our perspective, makes it easier to transition between the two facilities. A good example, if we're placing an artist in the amphitheater and it begins selling well, we can transition them into the stadium a little easier. And this is because they already have their set list programmed, because they know exactly when they're going to start and when they're going to end. And when we start changing these things on them, it throws a little wrench in their plan, and they don't like it. From a community standpoint, I think there's also a couple reasons that'd be helpful. It could alleviate traffic within an event that starts slightly later. Fans may be showing up to the venue after rush hour. could also benefit potential businesses around the stadium and amphitheater in the form of people staying at restaurants longer, visiting clubs, bars, shops a little bit longer. You all know that the Bridge District is kind of the a concentration where the city's concentrating on. It's an important aspect of West Sacramento. And we feel that this amphitheater can really contribute a lot to the rest of the Bridge District and help drive incremental business into the area. So it's important that it's a successful business venture. Another key point I'd like to emphasize is now is the time for us to take advantage of the marketplace. Some of our competitors are actually disappearing. Canocti Amphitheater, about an hour and a half away, is gone now, or it's closing here in November. The Sleep Train Amphitheater in Marysville is going to disappear here soon. Live Nation is going to sell that, and so it'll no longer be an amphitheater. They're just waiting to get out of it. So some of these, which may be negatives, could be a big positive for us. We have the opportunity to step in and really be that destination in this region for outdoor concerts. So I think it's critical to make our venue as appealing as possible to the industry. There was a mention about us policing ourselves. And that is true. This is, but I'd like to think that we've been pretty successful in the last, in our history at policing ourselves. We've had very few complaints. I can't remember the last complaint we've had. It's been a few years, and I think our track record speaks for itself. We go to great lengths to make sure that artists abide by the rules at Raley Field. We put it in their contract what time the curfew is and the sound measurements that they need to hit in order to abide by the rules that we need to follow. And I think we've done a great job at it. And our partners that we work with, other promoter partners, they've also done a good job at this. And they have other venues in which they have amphitheaters right around $1 million homes, and they've been successful and been doing this for a long time as well. And so we can learn from them in addition to our past experience. Finally, it was also mentioned there were a couple items we may have missed in Attachment 2. Attachment 2 is what we have proposed for the monitoring plan. And it's very similar to Attachment 1. I'd like to think it's simplified a little bit. And we did miss a couple items, namely monitoring at Ironworks, which we're not opposed to. And then also, we did not make mention to monitoring at heights of 50 and 100 feet. That's what the reference is. That is difficult for us to do right now, monitoring at heights of 50 and 100 feet without the actual buildings there. There are some things we can do to extrapolate a little bit. Talking to our sound consultant, there's a way to put a measurement device on a pole and put it up 25, 30 feet in the air. From that, you can sort of extrapolate what the sound level would be at 50 feet and 100 feet in the air. But not until those buildings are built, I don't know how else we would do that without floating a weather balloon, to be perfectly honest. So with that being said, I really would like to reiterate the importance of having these two venues, consistent with one another. And I think it would go a long way in helping us out and helping the community. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Savage. Are there any questions of the applicant? All right, well, thank you very much. This is a workshop, and I'm just wondering if there are any comments or questions of staff regarding Liebig?
Sure, I'll go ahead and start. I had just one kind of general comment. The noise contours that are shown in attachment, I think it's three or four, or five, the ones in the back. Why are the noise contours different at different times? If Jeff can answer it, that'd be fine with me if
Sure.
it's fine with you.
Again, this is not a public hearing, so feel free to come forward.
Okay. I need to refresh myself, but most likely their difference, it's because of the hours of operation. Are you looking from figure 1, 2, and figure 3, those differences?
Yeah, they're all the same decibels, so
Correct.
just kind of curious why sound is different. Or is
So,
it just ambient noise?
so the noise, the measurement in West Sacramento is based upon a 70 decibel average over a 24-hour period. So the longer you play, the louder that average is going to get. And because the average sound at the mixing board is higher than 70, it's going to be probably 95 at the mixing board. So the longer you play at 95, the higher the average, that 70 LDN average over a 24-hour period, the higher it goes at certain points. If that
Yeah,
makes sense.
what's important to remember here is that, the 70 isn't representing what the sound level, is at that moment, or what the people at the concert would experience. What those contours are showing is when you do the calculation, because as Jeff said, the 70 dB is a 24-hour weighted average. So we would expect the contours to change depending on the duration of the event, since it's not a real-time, so if you're looking at, say, figure 1, for example, somewhere at, say, 9 o'clock in the middle of that event, it doesn't mean that it would be 70 at that level at 9 o'clock. What it's showing that when you do the calculation, which again is based on a 24-hour average, those are the contours where you would be within, or of course, or outside the 70 decibel range. And so why the contours are different is largely based on the fact that there's a calculation that's spread out over 24 hours rather than just during the time of the event itself. If we were to look at just, I say, the event window, the contours would be further different. But since our exterior noise threshold in the zoning ordinance and general plan for the triangle is 70 dB LDN, that's why you're seeing these differences. It's
Okay.
not an LEQ basis.
Sorry, I didn't catch the fact that it was a 24-hour.
Yeah,
Average.
that's the main difference between is noise. Noise is usually looked at on what they call LEQ basis, which is like on a 1 hour average, or it's looked at on an LDN basis, which is a 24-hour, and it's weighted. So at nighttime, the background is discounted because theoretically at nighttime, the ambient noise levels are lower than they are during the day.
Okay. And for clarification, under concert noise and complaint monitoring in the community, the monitoring will be done by River City Stadium Management or their consultant? Okay. Okay. And then under that one, C, it states multiple complaints by one person or multiple calls from the same address shall be counted only as one complaint. Is this for one event, or is this across all events over a certain time period
Now, this is on a per event basis.
per event? Could that be clarified, just as? Under complaint hotline, all complaints, they're to be reviewed and summarized to the city within 72 hours, including calls made to the police department. Is this a realistic response time for our police to provide this information to River City Stadium Management in order to get it back to the city within 3 days?
It hasn't been an issue in the past, and of course, many people are unaware of the hotline, regardless of how it's publicized. So their first instinct, if there is to be a noise issue, is to call the police department as opposed to call the hotline.
That brings up an interesting point regarding the accessibility and notice of the hotline, but, and whether or not it's sufficient. One comment left, and that's regarding the fine of $1,000. Perhaps a sliding scale. I know the amphitheater isn't meant to hold more than 2,000 or 3,000 people. The venues will be smaller, a little bit more intimate. Maybe $1,000 would be appropriate for that. An event at Rayleigh Field with 10,000 people, a $1,000 fine seems a little bit on the small side, and I would guess that's closer to the salary that you're paying your noise consultant to be sitting out there monitoring noise in the first place. So that's it. Those are my only comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Moore?
Thank you, Ron. Just a couple comments, and David, maybe I'm not quite understanding what you and Jeff are saying. Are we kind of disagreeing a little bit on the final proposal here?
We believe that for the amphitheater specifically, based on the mitigation measures, that need to be some additions to this, but the amphitheater needs this type of program also. So, we see it that it's possible that one program could fit both facilities.
Well, I'm sure it could, but we're just disagreeing, like he was talking about having a monitoring program at 50 and 100 feet, and he's saying that I don't think so.
Well, yeah, we recognize that it may be impractical to do that in the immediate term until such time as some other buildings are built around there. But we definitely want to see the concept be in there, and if it's impossible to do, immediately, that may be the case. But sooner or later, we'll have some stuff built out there, and we'll need to make sure. This was a specific area of discussion during the amphitheater project.
Well, and it makes logical sense. At some point, we're gonna have to know what the sound's doing from the amphitheater, whether it's going straight out, it's going up, what it's doing. And we're gonna need to know that eventually.
Well, yeah, and this kind of brings up one point that I neglected to make in my initial presentation about how the environment out there is going to be changing so greatly, over time. And we feel at a staff level, and just as an example of this, new buildings coming up and needing to monitor higher up in the air, that it's important that this program, evolve as the neighborhood around the stadium and amphitheater evolves also. And so one of the things we want to discuss with the commission tonight is, when might it be pertinent to review this, if this new proposal does go into effect, when might it be best to see it again, to see how it's working and what's changing around there.
Well, that happened to be where I was going next, because, one of the things that I found interesting over the years, we used to visit this monitoring plan every year with the baseball. And then all of a sudden, we let them go 2 years, and they really only had a couple of complaints as far as the police ever talked about. And we got a couple of complaints, except for one venue where we got a lot of complaints, but one guy got out of control. But beyond that, after that, we've never had more than one complaint a year or something. It was so ridiculous that you finally allowed them to have a real time lapse in this, which I think you said, when's the last time we visited? It's 2004?
2003.
See, but they haven't had any complaints, so there's no need to. The only point I was going to make here tonight is I'm very concerned on how it starts out. So the first 2, 3, 4 concerts, I'd really like to know what happens and make sure the amphitheater, the way it's built, is what it's really producing. You know, and I think that's real important that we all get a feel for it right away, that it's doing what we thought it was gonna do. And then not, if it is, you know, we don't need to look at it a whole lot till we start building. Or, you know, if you want, about the only way you could put something up there for monitoring is to hire a crane, which would be very expensive, I'm sure, I don't know. But it'd be expensive, but if we needed to know that answer, you know, one time of doing it would be sufficient so that you would know the answer of what the thing was and they could start planning accordingly. But, you know, I don't want to get too far afield, but I think that the River Cats have always done a good job. They've monitored themselves well. Therefore, I don't want to, you know, have to visit it every other meeting. And you know, but I would like to let them have 3 or 4 concerts and maybe get an update of how it worked and an update of how the monitoring plan went. And then if it's going like everybody says it's gonna go, we just move on and maybe visit it every couple of years if that's what we need to do. Or maybe not till we start building out there. That would be my comment. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Can
Joe?
I build off Charlie's right there? I think we could maybe put something in here. There's something in there already for that, for the amphitheater. The first 3 concerts held at the amphitheater will be monitored. Can we expand that to be at Rayleigh Field and the amphitheater? And that
But I
might
think we
alleviate
pretty
Charlie's.
much know the answer at Rayleigh Field of how,
You're right.
you know,
Yeah.
and I saw that there's, you know, and maybe 3's the answer, maybe you want to do 6 so that you're sure, but I think at that point, we need to get an update. You know, I think it'd be nice to invite Jeff back here to see us again, because he loves coming to these evening meetings. And in the same token, staff would have some real information there that the sound people can put down for us, and we go, you know what? Everything's working great, or we go, you know what? It's working great and everywhere, but somehow we've got some sound over in this one area causing us trouble, which means it's bouncing off of something somewhere, and we're working on it. But if everything's fine, then we probably don't need to hear it. In my opinion, again, I don't think we need to hear it if it's working fine after 3 concerts or whatever you determine. We don't need to hear it till we start building out there. And then if, the only other thing would be, you know, whether we need to have that one test made so that we would know what the things were, or if, like I think Jeff suggested, these sound people always have an answer for everything, you know, but I mean, he could take it at 20 feet and figure out what it's gonna be at 100. I mean, if that's in fact true, I guess it's okay. But I'd just like you to look into it a little bit before you come back.
Yeah, our thought were along those lines, that we would go, you know, get at least a few events under our belt, you know, next season. Because I don't think there's gonna be anything in time for this year to happen out there at the stadium. And then once the amphitheater is up and running and we know what's happening out there in the real world, we can report back, and then maybe it will be status quo for a few years until more stuff starts happening around there, and maybe we look at it again then.
Mr. Kelvin?
I just have a couple things. I think we've addressed most of my concerns, but I can visualize the benefit of a later release to the businesses that will go up there eventually, and I think that's a good point. But I like the idea of a yearly monitoring process to see where we're at with it, especially when we do start building out there. It's going to go in phases, and I think some input from newer residents as we build out there is important. So I would agree with Commissioner Moore on that aspect. I'm curious, has there been any community outreach done with the residents in the current area?
In fact, there has. We actually walked to all the local residents at Ironworks, and then kind of across 275 Tower Bridge Gateway, and we handed out flyers, invited them to come to the ballpark and show them some plans and kind of walk them through everything and seek feedback. So we have done that, and we actually got some good feedback from people. You know, you need to put in bicycle racks. You know, you need to make sure it's ADA accessible. Some of these things we knew and we're going to do, but you know, other things, of course, yeah, we'll do that. So we have gotten feedback from people in the community and right around us.
Be interested in what maybe some of the concerns were, but I appreciate that, thank you. I was trying to get an idea of how loud 70 dBL was, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, well, 70 certainly is audible.
I guess that much.
Yeah, and 70 is the threshold in the general plan, and usually the noise thresholds are not based on, you know, whether you can hear it or not. It's based on whether it's hazardous
Sure.
or not for exposure over a certain amount of time. And so certainly during the event itself, you know, if you're at a concert, you're probably more in the 90 decibel range for most, most shows. But, you know, 70 is what's been in general plan for a long time as an acceptable exterior exposure threshold. And that's also, we want to clarify, the 70 is an exterior exposure level. If you're talking about inside a residence, the threshold is much lower. But we expect, you know, with modern construction that, you know, you can get 20 decibels, you know, easily with that. So, but 70 is higher than what we permit elsewhere in town, and that's a recognition of this area being a more urban environment. The freeways are there, the railroad is there, and that is, and boats on the river, things like that. So it's a you know, recognition of what that environment is like compared to elsewhere in town.
And I actually just had one last question. Who reviews the reports?
They're submitted to our office, are they not, Steve? The noise monitoring reports?
In the past, noise monitoring reports were reviewed by an independent consultant the city hired, and that occurred for two of the first 3 years after the development of Rayleigh Field. Since that point in time, we analyzed them ourselves and had discussions with the consultant of the River Cats, who I believe, if it hasn't changed, is still Steve Pettyjohn. No, it's not. Oops. Oh, okay. Well, sorry about that. But well, anyway, we had discussions with their consultant afterwards. Should we have difficulty, we didn't feel it was necessary to retain our own consultant, given the fact that the complaints were relatively minor the first couple of years. So we look at them on our own, try to make our own interpretation, and then if we have had difficulties, we've consulted with their consultant as to questions and issues we've had, and I'm assuming that procedure is still acceptable. If we found that there were difficulties and continued complaints at Rayleigh Field or at the new amphitheater, then we'd probably negotiate with them to allow for us to hire our own consultant. But that has only been the case for the first couple of years, and then we found that unnecessary.
When I ask, I think that if we ever get to the point where we do have a yearly review process, that would be good information to have. So I'm sure there would be a retention of reports for a period of time until we came to the review process.
Yes.
Commissioners, any other comments, questions? Mr. Savage, would you like to make another comment?
I just had a quick comment when you were asking about how loud 70 LDN is. We have done some measurements in the Bridge District on a 24-hour scale, and we found that certain locations are as high as 65 is the 24-hour measurement. 65, 64, maybe there was one 66, but generally 65 is sort of what the kind of typical measurement is. And a lot of that has to do with the fact there's a raised freeway nearby, and it can't get, that sound doesn't get blocked. So, yeah.
All right. I have a couple questions. This is presented to us as a program, which is kind of an odd title. We get ordinances and conditional use permit applications and all kinds of different things. But this is a program, and it implies to me there's kind of a living document, and through the discussion this evening, it appears as though if the city finds a need to revise this, then it can be brought forward. And if the applicant would see a need to revise this as was done this, I believe this time, it can be brought back to the commission. And I think if that's true, then I think we need to just move with the times. And a lot of this that we're talking about is speculation about when we develop high rises and that sort of thing. And as the Bridge District develops, we'll need to look at this again. So I think, we have a great basis here for moving forward, and I think the comments were excellent from the commissioners tonight to help when this comes back. But I think if we are correct in assuming that this is not the same as an ordinance, that it's more, it has the ability to come back and periodically at the request of the city or the applicant, then those issues that would come up from time to time could be easily resolved by this body. Is that a safe assumption?
Yeah, what we're really trying to do here is make sure that we, adequately mitigate an impact that was identified in the original document. Unfortunately, CEQA gives us the ability to make adjustments in how we do mitigation if we find a more effective way to do that. So that's really what we're doing here, and what we've done in the past, with the last few times this has been up here, is just, again, trying to find the most effective way to mitigate the impact that was identified in the original environmental review for the stadium. And then similarly measure in the amphitheater neg deck.
Okay, staff, do you have any questions of the commission as far as your notes and everything, if any clarification or?
I think between Steve and I, we have it, and we'll come back on the 5th and bring this back and ask for your approval.
Okay, and so at this point, I would like to inform the audience that the revised noise monitoring program will be scheduled for approval on November 5th, 2009. So we'll be seeing this on the 5th. So with that, I would want to move on to informal discussions. And Steve, do you want to, just for a minute, talk about how the process on the 15th, what we should be expecting as far as the protocol?
Okay, well, these are our own thoughts that have been sort of supplemented by a discussion that we had with the city council, anticipating this was going to come out back at their first meeting in August. On the 15th, our thoughts were that we would have a brief presentation, actually a presentation that could go on at least 20 minutes, as long as 30, up here in the council chambers. That would be on the general plan alternatives, which the commission would sit as a group, and all interested attendees would sit in the audience. And we do that for a couple reasons. First of all, the video facilities up here are significantly better than downstairs. Secondly, we have the ability to capture that portion of the meeting and utilize it and send it on our local cable station up here, whereas we do not have the video capability downstairs. Then we would break as a group and go downstairs and work in small groups, and the consultant would have exercises that have been identified, and you get a sort of semblance of that on the back page of the administrative newsletter, and that process would probably continue for approximately an hour to an hour and a half, and would hopefully break by 9 o'clock or so. So some of the discussion points are, would that seem to work? It's, as you can tell, sometimes lately it's more difficult than ever to try to get people out to a meeting, something we've observed as sort of as a trend, which is also why the council has asked us to look at other means of participation, small group meetings with other commissions and groups around town, including the chamber and other commissions, which we've laid out over the next month and a half. But we also thought it would be a good opportunity as part of one-year meetings, not only to get the information on the alternatives, but also to get an idea as what some of the reactions are from interested citizens who would be attending the meeting. So that's kind of how we look at it, about a half hour maximum up here, then breaking, then go downstairs and meet in small groups. And it would be up to the commission to decide whether or not they wanted to participate in those small groups or just be there and sort of float around the room and watch the discussions that are going on at the couple of the tables of individuals that are there. So,
All right,
so
thank you. Any
nothing's been
questions?
nothing's been finalized, and we still
Just
have
as a
2 weeks.
comment, though, how are you going to get people here? What was your thought?
How will we get them up here?
No, not up here. I mean, how are you publicizing this?
Oh,
to-
a lot of ways. We have e-blast list of about 400 names now or more or on the general plan process. We're meeting with one of the newspapers who is doing a special edition on the general plan alternatives next week. We've had a number of press releases. We've identified a number of groups in the city, special email sort of groups, what do you want to call them? Oh, associations around town that we've contacted as
Okay.
well. So that's sort of the publicity.
Yeah, I
today,
just haven't
putting it
seen
on
a
the
lot
city-
about-
Put it on the city's webpage. Well, part of it is because of the fact that the report was just released Tuesday to the council, press release Wednesday out there. Formation of the Facebook page was, I believe, on late Tuesday. So a
Perfect.
lot of it, so
Yeah.
we're having a big effort over the next 2 weeks, and so we've sort of identified a number of sources, Business Journal B, and then the News Ledger and Press.
Yeah, that's
So
great.
That's, and, anything else that we can do to get the word out would be, is appreciated. We talked a little bit tonight with Ron and Beverly before the meeting and kind of get their thoughts on it as chair and vice chair of the commission, and they had some great ideas as well. But that sort of format sort of work, or, the awkward part is having a presentation up here and then having everybody go downstairs and kind of reform and meet. And so it's something that we really haven't tried before, but I think it can work if it's done well. It's just we'll probably be having people filter in and out during the presentation, just like we would have downstairs, the people that will come late. In that process of basically the meeting talked originally about being at 6:45. We'd probably started at 7 here. So rather than our regular 6 o'clock time, 7 o'clock, what we heard works better for people. And our goal would be to finish it not much later than 9.
All right, thank you, Steve. And I might add, Steve shared with us that we'll actually have a planning commission workshop on the 5th of November too. So that way we'll be able to discuss a lot of those things that we observed on the 15th. Any other informal discussion? I'm looking for a motion then.
Motion to adjourn?
All right, meeting adjourned.
So do you want to go back in 204 and meet? We'll